All right, so we are here now debating the proposition as whether the argument from evil, whether that is a good argument for the existence of God. I just back up a drop. Just I want to lay out one thing that I think is an important factor, and that I believe that the belief in God is properly basic. So I don't think arguments are necessary really for a belief in God. I think a belief in God could be justified without argumentation. I'm not saying this is why I believe in God, and without this, there's no belief in God. I believe in God because it's properly basic, and there's a host of arguments. I just think that the argument from evil is a valid argument, is a good argument that leads to the conclusion that there is a God. And the argument is really a simple one, that if God does not exist, then there doesn't exist any more objective moral values and duties. If God doesn't exist, then we could not say that something is objectively wrong. We could say it's unfashionable. We could say it is something that we don't like. We could say that it is not conducive for human flourishing. But then again, there's no way we could say that the goal of having human flourishing is an objective goal that we should all strive for. So without God, everything is purely subjective, and everything, even if we think it's objective, it's really still subjective, and it's just a byproduct of evolution. So in order to affirm the proposition, the claim that morals are objective, that there can be something that is objectively wrong and something that is objectively good, the only way we can do that is we have to ground that into something that is not a material entity. We'd have to ground that in something, and the only thing that we can ground it on would be something metaphysical, something like God. So unless we affirm the position that God exists, we do not have anything to ground objective moral values and duties. That's the basic thrust of it. I don't know if you want to hop in here, see if there's anything so far you disagree with, and we'll take it from there.
Well, there's plenty, because there's a lot of implications in what you've said that I disagree with. Well, when you say that something is just subjective, the problem there is that is a self-refuting statement, because the concept of just, if something is just something, that is a value judgment implying that it is unimportant somehow. And to judge something as unimportant would require a standard of value. So the statement that my standard of value is unimportant is self-refuting, because it implies that according to my standard of value is unimportant. So the point of the matter is, so that while value judgments are inherently subjective, they're not subjective in the way that, say a perspective is subjective. I have a subjective perspective of this conversation. I'm looking at it from my point of view, and you're looking at it from your point of view. But that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is impetus when we're talking about value. So we have an internal impetus to judge things a certain way. This is the way I view moral judgments. And the point being is that the reason what you're commenting on or remarking on as being compelling for the notion that moral judgments are objective is that they're incontrovertible. So when you make a judgment about something being moral, obviously it is incontrovertible. You're not capable of second guessing it. You're not saying, well, that's up for debate whether or not it was wrong for Hitler to kill people. And I'm agreeing with this. But what I'm saying is what makes it incontrovertible is simply the fact that you can't second guess your standard of value, because to second guess your standard of value would be paradoxical. Because the simple fact is that you would have to use your standard of value to deem your standard of value unimportant. So it's simply impossible.
All right. So two things over there. I'll start on the thing you said over there, that first of all, why do we have to have a standard of any values, period? And not only, let me phrase it differently, how can we have values? Again, if we're recognizing, and it sounds like you are agreeing to the fact that the our morals and our value system that we do erect for ourselves is still arbitrary. I didn't hear any explanation of how it's anything but arbitrary. You're saying that we can't second guess ourselves, which was that was the second point. I don't understand why we cannot second guess ourselves. We second guess ourselves on many things, on things that we believe true. We still second guess ourselves, and we still try to push forward and see and test it and see if it holds true, regardless of testing. So I don't know why we shouldn't be able to second guess it. But the main point is, even if we don't second guess ourselves, and even if we shouldn't second guess ourselves, it still remains simply subjective. Meaning, me going about my business and my daily affairs is not any more moral than, let's go back to Hitler or to any Nazi. There's no way that we can value. How are we going to measure one being objectively more moral than the next? We have to say it's subjectively one's subjectively more moral and one's subjectively immoral. But for who? Who's saying it's subjectively more moral and more immoral? Obviously, Hitler didn't think so. So unless we have an objective standard, there really is no standard. There are just billions of people with their own morality. Yeah, there might be larger groups that agree more or less over that one set of morals is more moral than the next. But that just, again, that's just a fashionable statement. That's not a truth statement.
Okay. When you were talking about moral judgments, we're really talking about a few things happening at the same time. So on one thing, there would be the standard of value, killing is terrible or suffering is terrible. And then also you have something like a moral judgment, like we should illegalize prostitution because it leads to suffering. Now, that judgment obviously can change from person to person, changes from culture to culture. People have different opinions about that, because that is partially rooted in a truth assertion. The truth assertion being that the prostitution leads to suffering. The standard of value, suffering is terrible, is not something you can second guess. It is ultimately due to impetus. And you would have to agree with me that when it comes to behavior, not just human behavior, but any kind of creature's behavior, impetus and knowledge can manifest in very similar ways. So for instance, if I was looking at, say, the behavior of a spider building a web, we might say that the spider knows how to build a web. I don't think that's accurate. What I would actually say is that the spider has an impetus to spin silk a certain way, and that the web doesn't look right to the spider unless it looks a certain way. So it has an impetus to judge it as looking a certain way. And you have impetuses on all kinds of matters unrelated to morality. You have impetuses related to how you judge being comfortable in certain heat. You know, if it's too hot, you're not comfortable. If it's too cold, you're uncomfortable. These are impetuses that are common across humanity. We're all comfortable in a certain, maybe 60 to 80 degree temperatures. But we wouldn't say that is objectively true, that 60 to 80 degrees is a good temperature. And then
I lost you there. I don't know if it's you or me.
Both of us. Okay, we're back.
All right, there we
go. We wouldn't say that is objectively true. That just because across humanity we seem to all like it between 60 and 80 degrees doesn't mean it's objectively true that that's a good temperature. It is just common across the species because we have a common impetus to want at a certain temperature, because we biologically evolved to like that certain temperature because it's better for our cells or whatever. So when we're talking about, if you want to really judge this in my point of view, you have to really understand the concept of impetus as it relates to judgments. Value judgments are ultimately rooted in unconscious impetuses that you have no control over.
Hey, so just first of all, I want to clarify. So it sounds to me like you are conceding that morality is not objective. Are you conceding that?
That morality is not objective? I'm saying that morality has objective elements when you're talking about certain judgments about morality, as I just said. So, for instance, the truth element is usually where we disagree, where people disagree about moral things. So as I was speaking about earlier, the prostitution example, one might have the judgment that prostitution is acceptable, and one might have the judgment that prostitution is unacceptable, but the disagreement there usually revolves around whether the prostitution leads to suffering. The judgment suffering is terrible is only going to be disagreed by people that have a weak standard of they have a weak trait of compassion. Compassion is not an idea. Compassion is a trait that you are born with in certain amounts or certain relative levels. So what I'm saying is that while there is disagreement, there are disagreements usually over the objective element of a value judgment or a moral judgment or a moral criteria. It's not over the subjective element.
The question is, so on the fundamental level, so correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you're saying there's a fundamental level that's objective to everybody. And then the question is how we go about achieving it. Different people might have different ways of achieving that.
No, I don't agree. I'm not saying that at all.
So then if you can explain yourself again, I did not get that.
What I'm saying is that you have an innate, each of us have an innate impetus to dislike the suffering of other people. And we know
I
that.
disagree with that.
You disagree with that?
Well, you might have it. Well, obviously, certain people don't have that.
Yep.
Hitler didn't have that. Hitler had no problem with suffering of many people.
Quite true. Hitler had for whatever reason, a low amount of empathy. And?
Correct.
And how is this problematic?
So it's not objective. Some people look to eliminate suffering. Right. Some people look to maximize suffering.
And how is this problematic?
So who says one is objectively better? One is better than the next.
Okay. I'm not saying it's objective. What I'm saying is that we're incapable of judging otherwise because it is an impetus we have. So for instance, I cannot make the judgment that is my standard of value is unimportant. So my standard of value is equal to Hitler's. You're saying that I can make that judgment. We can't make that judgment any more than the spider can judge that a web that is all cross-stitched in some other pattern is just as good as a web that's stitched a different way. Or that you can make the judgment that a sandwich with shit in it as opposed to beef or kosher beef is equally as good, is equally as tasty. You have impetuses that you are unable to control. And the same thing goes for morality. The very idea that I could question whether or not Hitler is right to kill people and I am right to dislike it would require me to second guess my standard of value, and I'm saying that is impossible.
Well, why is it impossible?
Is it possible for the spider to second guess that the web should be formed a certain way? Because it's due to an impetus.
Again, the spider doesn't have is not an intelligent animal. We're intelligent. We're able to second guess other,
but not
other facets of our reality.
Okay, can you second guess? Let's say a surgeon cut open your stomach. Could you second guess whether or not that was pleasant or not? Without anesthetic, let's say he just cut you open and started pulling your organs out. So if you can just second guess whether or not that's fun or not, I guess you could just judge that they don't need anesthetic because you could just say, well, I second guess that it hurts.
Because if the surgeon cuts me open and my nerve endings are working properly and I'm not under any anesthesia, it is an objective fact that I feel the pain.
Okay, but what does pain fun, or is that a fun feeling?
Some people do enjoy pain to a certain degree. Others don't. There's no objective standard for that. Overall, most people do not enjoy pain, but there's no objective truth to whether pain is felt. Of course, is if the necessary conditions are met for pain to be felt, then it is objectively true that pain is felt. But whether it is uncomfortable or not,
what we're getting to is whether you can second guess it or not.
Second guess what?
whether you can second guess whether the experience of having your stomach cut open and your organs pulled out is enjoyable or not.
It either is enjoyable or it's not. Again, it is not an objective question for all people.
I'm asking whether or not. Okay, so you're on a table and you got your stomach cut open and they're pulling your organs out, and there's another guy next to you who's having the same thing done to him. Correct. And he's saying, "Boy, this is awesome," and you're laying there going, "Oh!"
Correct.
You're saying that you would need an objective standard,
no,
an objective arbitrator between the two of you to decide that you having your stomach cut open is bad.
No, because there is no inherent bad thing about it. It's something that is inherently subjective.
Okay, so
I'm not making an objective claim.
Okay, so you could just as easily as the other man just judge that it's fun. So they don't need the answer.
Again, subjective for me. I'm not making a claim that this is painful or this is bothersome for everybody. Mm-hmm. I'm making this is bothersome for me, and it truly is, and I have no qualm with that. I have no reason to second guess that. It doesn't bother me. Other people don't feel pain; they don't feel pain. I'm only making a subjective claim that I am bothered by it, that this is bothering me, and that comports with reality. So I have no problem.
So there are two judgments happening there at the same time. You're at one hand saying that it's okay for him to enjoy having his stomach cut open, and it's okay for me to not want my stomach cut open.
Correct.
That's one value judgment, and that is a moral judgment.
That's not a moral judgment.
Well, yes, it's interpersonal.
You're
saying it is permissible for him to have this if he enjoys it.
It's permissible for you to breathe. It's not a moral judgment. It's not a judgment of bad or good or evil.
Judgment about an interpersonal matter.
Okay, right.
Let me get to my point though.
All right.
And then you simultaneously have the judgment that it's okay that it hurts a hell of a lot. I don't want my stomach cut open without an anesthetic. So those are two separate things. My point being is that you can't second guess that having your stomach cut open and your guts pulled out is fun. In the same way, I can't second guess that I want to stop Hitler from engaging in the genocide.
Absolutely.
Because it has to do with, because it has to do with instinctual, elemental impetuses that are ingrained in my brain, essentially from birth. And it would be just as impossible for me to second guess that as it would for, say, the dog not to second guess whether or not it wants to smell a butt, or the gopher to second guess whether or not it wants to dig holes, or anything else. We have obviously instincts that we cannot second guess. They're impetuses that are beyond reasoning, that are not subject to reasoning. And moral judgments are these kinds of impetuses, just like taste, just like liking things to be a certain have beauty, or your sexual attraction to a certain person. It's the same sort of phenomena. And I'm agreeing with you that they're incontrovertible judgments. I cannot second guess the judgment that it is terrible for Hitler to kill people. Just as a person in Japan might make that same judgment, a person in Germany might make the same judgment, a modern person in Florida might make the same judgment. So it'll be the same judgment all over the world. But I'm saying this is because we are the same species and we have evolved a lot of the same preferences because our instincts or impetuses, because we're the same species. It's not because it's objective.
Okay, so I think we're in agreement over here. I agree that for somebody that let's say, for instance, let's say I truly despised a certain genre of music. I couldn't second guess whether I despise it. I truly do despise it. I agree with that. But I couldn't then go ahead and say that other people that are listening to that music are wrong.
Right. That second judgment, though, would be a judgment about an interpersonal behavior. There's actually two judgments going on there at the same time. For instance, if you liked ice cream, like chocolate ice cream, somebody else liked vanilla, Your judgment that ice cream is tastier vanilla is something you can't second guess. But at the same time, you also can't second guess the judgment that he can eat the ice cream of his choice. Those are two separate judgments. The judgments that you can enjoy rock music and another person can enjoy rap music is a separate judgment than the judgment that rap music is better or rock music is better than rap music. So often when we give these examples of situations where we're tolerant for people making different decisions, we're really talking about two judgments happening at the same time. One would be the judgment that one thing is better than the other thing. And then another thing would be the judgment that this person can make their own choice about what they enjoy too.
Again, so I agree if let's go to the example that you gave, the ice cream. If I were to like a certain flavor, it would be, again, objectively true that I like that flavor. But when I make the claim that that flavor is better than another flavor, I am inherently making only a claim for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I am only saying I personally enjoy X flavor over the other flavor. That is the length and extent of my claim. And that is the length and extent that my claim can only go. It cannot go further than that, so long as I understand that this claim that I'm making is only something in myself. It has nothing to do with anybody else. Is when I'm making a moral claim, that's not the claim we're making. And again, that goes back to my opening statement. We could say it's unfashionable. We could say, I don't enjoy when people do it, or wouldn't do it myself. But that does not lead to the claim that it is wrong. It is somebody murdering somebody is no more wrong than somebody eating chocolate ice cream, despite the fact that I think vanilla tastes better than chocolate.
You're still confusing the two issues. Do you enjoy it when other people, you enjoy chocolate ice cream more than vanilla? Does this therefore mean you would enjoy it if everybody was forced to eat chocolate ice cream? That's a separate matter.
I agree it's a separate matter.
Okay. So it's a separate value judgment being made. The value judgment that you like chocolate ice cream better than vanilla ice cream is a separate value judgment than the judgment that people should be forced to eat ice cream that they don't enjoy. That's a separate judgment. The other is
I'm not making that judgment.
Well, yes, you are, because you're relating it to the Hitler issue. Whether or not
why is that any different?
It's the same, but it's the same in different ways than you're saying it is. Okay, so my judgment that Hitler, that it's terrible for people to suffer, and Hitler might have a judgment that it's great for people to suffer.
Oh, can we pause, because I think we already we already lost common ground. No. You made a claim that it is bad for people to suffer. How can you make that claim?
No, I judge that it's bad.
You think it's unfashionable. You don't think it's good for people to suffer, but making that statement, you're fully recognizing, the same way when you make the claim that vanilla ice cream tastes better than chocolate, you're recognizing that that's only a personal opinion, but that's not a truth, a fact for everybody. Is that correct?
I am expressing myself using an imperfect language. When I say that the cat is up the tree, I am not implying that up is a true direction or that the earth is flat. Simultaneously, when I say that it is good, that something is good, I am not meaning or implying that it is objectively good. I'm just expressing myself using an imperfect language. So you have to use, and when you're having this discussion somewhat with a secular humanist, you can't just look for some instance where he says something that sounds like he means it's objective. That's not applying.
I'm not trying to catch you. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. I truly am.
Okay. I am not. It is not objectively true in any sense of the matter that killing people is wrong. That is not my position. Okay. In any way, manner. My position is, I judge it as wrong, and because this is an impetus that is born into my nature, I can't second guess it. Which means I can't second guess that I want to stop Hitler from killing people. I recognize that Hitler has a different impetus than me, but that is a different matter from whether or not I want to stop him from doing it. I have no choice in wanting to stop him from doing it, just as you have no choice in the matter. And as it relates philosophically, and I explained this earlier, you said you didn't catch it really. The reason this is true philosophically is because a standard of value, value judgment is rooted in a standard of value. To judge your own standard of value is unimportant because to say anything is unimportant would be a value judgment. You would have to use your standard of value to make that judgment. Therefore, you would be saying that according to my standard of value is unimportant. This would be as paradoxical of an assertion as this statement is false or everything I say is a lie. Since it is a paradoxical assertion, it simply cannot occur. Therefore, every value judgment you make, you are incapable of second guessing because to second guess it, to state that your standard of value is unimportant, arbitrary, you used the word arbitrary earlier, meaningless, whatever, would employ your standard of value. And therefore, it would be a paradoxical assertion. Therefore, you cannot do it.
All right. So, first of all, again, on the last point that you said over there that we cannot, because we'd run into some sort of paradox, we cannot second guess a value judgment. I don't see any.
No. The standard of value, not the value judgment. A judgment is rooted in a standard of value. It's an unconscious impetus you have or drive you have, that which then is the basis of the value judgment. So true statements are statements that fit reality. Value judgments are rooted in a standard of value, which is a quality of a mind. And so if you're making a statement like that is wrong, that is rooted in the standard of value, suffering is terrible. I can't stand the idea of other people suffering. That standard of value cannot be second guessed because the moment you say it's unimportant, you're saying that your standard of value is unimportant. And to say anything is unimportant would be a value judgment. And therefore you'd be saying that according to my standard of value is unimportant, which is paradoxical. Therefore it's impossible for you to make that assertion.
No, nobody's asking you to second guess that. Nobody's asking anybody to second guess whether they think that harming another person or inflicting harm on them or pain is that. Nobody's asking somebody who comes in thinking that it is bad to come out thinking it is good. I don't know anybody that's asking anybody to do that. But I think all this is irrelevant anyways because this is a question for moral epistemology. I'm talking in an ontological sense, and it seems we agree in an ontological sense that there is no objective moral values and duty. Once we agree that it's not objective, then I think the discussion runs its course already over there. My argument for God is that it is objective.
Prove it.
Oh, I can prove that it's objective the same way I can prove anything's objective.
Okay.
Are we having this conversation?
Yep, we're having this conversation.
Prove it.
That would be a truth assertion rooted
Prove it. Prove it.
Okay.
Prove we're having this conversation.
Okay, that's a different question. That goes into presuppositional apologetics.
No, it's not presuppositional apologetics. I don't believe in presuppositional apologetics, but how can you prove it?
Okay. Well, it does, but I'll go into it anyway. It has to do, well, that question ultimately has to do with rhetorical axioms. And the rhetorical axiom, I am having this experience, cannot be exhibited rhetorically. So you're asking me to rhetorically exhibit the fact that the knowledge that I'm having experience, which is known by only myself. And so that I cannot exhibit that to you rhetorically.
Well, we have experiences that don't comport with reality.
Right.
We all have experiences that don't comport with reality.
I like you to just go where this is going. If this is not,
so let me explain to you where this is going, and this isn't my own line of thought. Any argument that here's the same way you think it is objectively true that we're having this conversation, that's because of like you said, the experience you're having. You're using your cognitive faculties, and so long as there's no defeater for them and they're reliable, you are fully within your you're fully justified in accepting what you are experiencing. So the same experience that you're having, that we're conversing right now, is the same experience that I have when I have a moral experience. So you have no more justification in accepting the truth of the experience that we're conversing than I have in the truth of the experience that I have of objective moral values and duties.
Well, you're experiencing, when you're making a moral judgment, your judgment. You're experiencing your impetus.
No, it's not that.
If you see this a nice sunset, you're not experiencing the beauty of the sunset. That's a judgment coming from you. So the judgment that it's beautiful is an impetus.
That obviously is a judgment. I'm not talking about the beauty.
Well, here's the question I always have to ask guys like you who are making this statement. How come value is subjective for every single matter, beauty, taste, pleasure, everything, but not morality? Why are moral value judgments somehow different than all those kinds of other judgments?
On my worldview, it makes perfect sense.
I don't know whether it makes sense or not. I just want to know what suggests to you that they're different.
Well, they are different because God made them different, because God made morality objective and he did not make aesthetic judgments objective.
If that's part of your argument, you're begging the question. I just want to know.
I'm not begging the question. No, that's not part of the argument. You asked me why one is objective and one's not. The answer is on my worldview. It makes perfect sense. I didn't bring that up as part of my argument.
So, but if God said that it's great for you to be cut open with anesthetic, you could therefore make that is objectively true because he says it.
If God would say it, then it would be objectively true by definition, correct?
It'd be objectively good for you to have your stomach cut open with an anesthetic because God said it was objectively fun.
By definition, it would have to be, yes. Otherwise, we go into a logical incoherency.
Okay. So, I think I've explained. I'm getting an echo now. I think I've explained pretty well my position on this and how impetus and value can look kind of the same. I'd like to go into now why your view is wrong. Basically, when we're talking about morality, we will be in agreement that there's that all moral judgments are essentially what's the word I'm thinking of here? I have bad rhetorical memory sometimes. I forget words. Intrinsic. So let's say you decide to go ahead and donate to charity to impress a girl.
Sorry, I donate to charity
to impress a girl.
Okay.
Would that be a moral choice of yours? If you're doing something for your own selfish needs or for some kind of other thing, you would agree that would actually not be essentially moral, since it's extrinsic. You're essentially doing something to get some kind of reward.
I disagree. I disagree with your assertion. That can still be moral.
If I point a gun to your head and then make you give money to somebody, that would still be moral for you to give.
Well, that's a very different question. But there are these are things that have been discussed in the past. But whether I do a good act, but I do also have ulterior motives for doing the good act, whether that's still considered a good act. I mean, it's a great conversation. We could have it someday if you'd like. I'm not sure.
It's kind of related to defining what morality is. If it's obviously, I would say that obviously moral judgments are entirely intrinsic. If they're extrinsic at all, then they're not moral judgments. If I'm giving money to charity to impress a girl, while that might be something I might judge as good, as she might judge as good, my motive for doing it is to impress her and therefore to get something out of it. So
that's an epistemological question.
But it's not essentially a selfless act. I'm doing it for myself, right?
Perhaps.
But if God has an objective, if you're doing something because God objectively judges it as good, and you're just doing it to be in good favor with God, that wouldn't be morality.
Well, incorrect. Maimonides touches upon this in Guide for the Perplexed. Again, there's a great question, a question for religion, whether an act itself is good or whether there has to be a moral motive to the act as well. It's a great question. That's an epistemological question. I can answer you. I have no idea to any of these questions. The discussion that I'm looking to have is an ontological discussion. Are things actually good?
I'm just pertaining to your definition of what moral is. I just want to know if something that has an extrinsic motivation is if an action that is extrinsically motivated for some selfish purpose is by definition moral, or if moral must be intrinsic or guided by something in you. If I donate to charity because I care about people, if I donate to charity because I care about people, is that definitely a different thing than me donating to charity because I want to impress my girlfriend?
Oh, yeah. One would be a greater act of kindness than the other. 100%. One could be a greater act of kindness. But again, this question it interests me a bit, not all that much, and it's zero for this conversation.
Because I don't think you're grasping the relevance here. Okay.
Show me the relevance, and
I'm trying to explain the relevance. Okay. All right. So if it's extrinsic, okay, so basically all moral judgments are intrinsic. In my view, this is what I'm saying. It has to be intrinsic, so it has to be due to something in me. It can't be from it can't be from God. By the very definition of moral choices being intrinsic or due to some kind of impetus in myself, or even them to be moral, it cannot come from someone else. It has to come from something in me.
I mean, you could go on. I disagree with the premise, but go on.
So you disagree with the premise that it is actually a moral choice for me to give to charity because I want to help people, as opposed to me giving to charity to impress a girl.
No, it could be one's more moral and one's better than the other.
I would say that the second one is totally neutral, as far as my judgment on that matter would be. It's a totally neutral matter whether I'm trying to give it to impress a girl. It's just selfish, so there's no rule.
Okay, so again, I disagree, but where are you going with that? Again, I disagree with the premise, but let's assume that the premise is true. I just want to see where this is going.
Okay, so your assertion that morality is objective is basically rooted in the idea that moral judgments are extrinsic, because you're saying that the God can determine what is moral. And if you're simply doing something to make God happy, is that morality?
I lost the train of thought. First of all, there are two different types of morality. There's moral values and moral duties. So I think we're talking about over here moral duties.
You can explain if you want the difference and what.
Moral values would be like the difference between good and evil, for instance, right? There's good and evil, and then there's good and bad. They're two distinct things. Well, I'm trying to understand what you're saying over here. If I go ahead and give charity to an organization, right, and ulterior motives, and you're saying again, I think that's still good. You're saying that.
Well, I would judge it as good. I'm asking why. I'm asking if the judgment is of a moral nature. Does the judgment on your part involve moral judgment? Is what I'm asking.
No, I don't believe so. No.
Okay, so it doesn't involve a moral rationale for you to give to charity to impress a girl.
Correct.
But it does involve moral rationale for you to give to charity because you care about people or want to help people.
Well, again, it would be a better act. It would be I'm
asking if it involves moral rationale on your part. Whether it's
involved.
So what I'm pointing out is that moral rationale has to be intrinsic. Moral rationale is if it's moral, if a rationale is moral, that is implying that it's intrinsic. It can't be.
If I am not killing people simply because I don't want to go to jail, and I go through my life without killing anybody, I've led a moral life. I'm not sure what you're saying.
But is the rationale intrinsic?
Obviously not, because I'm making the claim that I've led a moral life.
But you're judging it as in a third person matter that way. But I'm asking if you're just not killing people because you don't want to go to jail, is that a moral rationale?
Perhaps the rationale is not moral, but I'm still leading a moral life.
By your third person judgment now.
I'm not sure
of this third person that you're not. I'm talking about if you personally didn't kill people just because you didn't want to go to jail, that kind of rationale wouldn't involve morality. That kind of rationale would be
perhaps the rationale didn't involve morality, but my actions were still moral actions, as opposed to somebody
that's you judging this hypothetical person, though. I'm talking about the person's rationale making the judgment. Is he making a moral type of rationale by saying that he just doesn't want to kill people because of his own sense of self-preservation of not wanting to go to jail?
I don't know I wouldn't dub the rationale moral, but the actions are moral.
Well, according to your third person judging this person that doesn't exist, I'm just talking about whether his actions involve a moral rationale on his part.
His actions, correct? Yes, 100%.
So by definition, his judgment, it's a moral rationale to just not kill people because you don't want to go to jail. That's a moral rationale.
No, yeah, but the actions are moral.
In your
you're assuming that a moral rationale is a necessary condition for the action to be moral. Okay. I disagree with that.
Okay. I'm trusting that some people watching this will understand where I'm going with this. I'm going to leave it at that because you're just not following me.
Correct.
You're absolutely not, which is fine. Okay. Now, you would agree that for there to be... Okay, so a purely objective matter, something that isn't entirely objective, is by definition, I'm getting an echo, is by definition trivial. So, for instance, I have the judgment that this coffee is pretty good, pretty tasty, which leads me to the judgment that I'd like to drink it. And we can have a discussion about whether some coffee is tasty and some other coffee is not tasty, because it interests us that things are tasty. Now, if we were talking about an entirely objective matter, whether or not my coffee is light brown or sort of a dark brown or whatever, we wouldn't have that stupid discussion because it has no importance to us. So to have any kind of discussion about anything, we have to ultimately be driven by some kind of subjective desire or impetus for us to actually care about it. If you say morality is entirely objective, why would we care about it?
So again, I'm not sure I follow the premise. Why do we have to care about something to have?
No, I'm asking why. I'm not asking why you have to. I'm asking why you care.
No, you said it is necessary for us to care about it to have a question on the objectivity of it.
Okay, which is I'm sure me in some other universe might have said that right now. I don't know who you're listening to. I didn't say those words. I'm saying I didn't say those words even close to that. What I said was when you're making when you have any kind of interest in any subject, it is ultimately because you have an impetus to be interested in that. If you had no interest whatsoever, then an objective matter is entirely objective. Basically implies that you have no interest in the subject at all, right?
No.
Objective, a matter that is, okay, it's entirely objective whether the McDonald's sign is canary yellow or some other kind of yellow. That is an entirely objective matter because nobody cares. It doesn't make any difference whether the sandwich is tasty or not, or whether you should stop at McDonald's, or whether you might enjoy going. Every single judgment you make that has any interest to you you have to have some kind of impetus to care about it, right? If you're saying that
care about it or don't, you're saying things that are objective,
entirely objective. If the matter is entirely objective, if it has
then you cannot care about
it, then by definition you have no interest in the matter at all. Then it doesn't relate to any impetus in you.
How does that logically follow? How does that logically follow?
It logically follows. I think I explained it already. But okay, so let me try to explain this in a different way. So what your position is that morality, being entirely objective, has nothing to do with an impetus in you. Right. So when I'm talking about something morally, I don't. I actually care about what's moral. Right. I care about that.
Correct.
Okay. So let's try this avenue. Is the distinct? What actually makes me care? Is what I'm asking. What is the impetus that makes me actually want to care about it?
About what's moral?
Yes.
Oh, two reasons. One, because we are created in the image of God, and God created us that we have, like you'd say, a moral impetus. And second, God commanded. Besides, built into our nature, we're built in the image of God. God commanded us.
But my question really is, what is the impetus? What is the impetus that makes me care whether Hitler kills people or not? What is the
what makes you care?
Mm-hmm.
It is innate in us to care, and God commanded us to care. Both of them lead us to care.
Okay. Now, if that's part of your argument, it begs the question. I'm not saying it is, but the fact
that's not part of my argument.
How is it distinguishable? The question is, what is the distinguishable from the impetus for you to care about moral matters, and to say that moral matters are simply your impetus? What is the distinguishability there? What is the distinction for me to say that what I judge as good is morality, and to say that I have an impetus to judge things as good?
The difference is whether things are actually good.
Which is determined how?
Well, if morality is objective, then things are objectively good, and I'm in my quest and my search to go and do good things. That is a coherent worldview.
But
good exists, and I am seeking out good. On the reverse, it is an incoherent worldview because good doesn't exist.
You're confusing yourself. I'm talking about, okay, you have an impetus, you're saying, to want things to be good, right?
Not to, you're saying. To want things to be good.
To seek goodness, whatever that may be. Okay.
Being that I'm created,
that's your belief. You're begging the question by mentioning God. I'm just asking whether you agree.
I'm not begging the question because I'm not giving my argument. I'm coming to
part of your argument that there's
no. I didn't mention this. I didn't mention this as part of my argument.
Okay. So I think you're begging the question, but the point being,
it's begging the question, not a problem.
Okay, but the point being, I just want you to agree that you have some kind of impetus to want things to be good. That's
absolutely.
Whether it comes from God or not is irrelevant. I just want to know that you have an
I do. I agree with that.
So what's the difference between you citing the impetus as your drive to want to care about moral issues, and whether or not your care about what we call moral issues is how we define them? What is the difference there? Isn't that just a tomato situation? Whether I'm saying that Hitler killing people, that I dislike Hitler killing people, I judge it as wrong, is my impetus for disliking it. What is the distinction between that and me saying that I have an impetus to not like it because it is wrong?
The only difference is whether it is wrong.
The only difference between those two things is how you're saying them. Is the impetus simply morality, or is the morality a judgment about, or is there's just an impetus to judge things as moral?
Here's the difference, I'm saying. In one way, you are saying you have this impetus to this innate desire within yourself to judge things whether it's right or wrong. But that doesn't mean that things are actually right or wrong. That doesn't necessarily follow. I don't care what some people have an impetus to do all different things. It doesn't necessarily follow that is an objective truth.
Right. But you care about what's moral, though.
I don't care whether you subjectively care about something.
For us to have but for us to have this conversation, we're basically implying that morality is not objective, because we actually have a concern about what is moral. And for there to be concern, then basically we're implying that there's an impetus for us to have a concern about it.
When you said the fact that we're having this conversation implies that it's not objective?
Mm-hmm.
How does it imply that?
Not entirely objective, because obviously we're concerned about it. Right?
Again, you're going back to the fact that you're concerned implies that it's not objective. I don't know how you're making that case. And second of all, again, you're getting caught up on the epistemological question. I'm talking about ontologically speaking. I'm not talking about moral epistemology.
Okay. Could you quickly just explain the difference there?
Sure. Moral epistemology is how we come to know what is moral, what is right, what is wrong, making decisions. We might try to do good but do bad. These are decisions that we make daily, some smaller, some bigger. But moral ontology is the fact that there is things that are wrong. There are things that are objectively wrong. There are things that are objectively good. Then moral epistemology is our quest to try and live up to that standard or not.
Okay.
So those are wholly distinct.
No, what I'm at, I honestly, I don't see any distinction between those two things. One, you have an impetus to want things to be good. What is the difference between that impetus and saying that I simply have an impetus and I call that impetus morality?
You can call it whatever you want, but it still doesn't make it objectively moral.
It doesn't make it objectively moral because objective morality doesn't make any sense. Because
if objective morality doesn't make any sense, then if there's no objective morality, then there is no morality any more than there is right and wrong flavors of ice cream.
Well, I would say morality is simply value judgments that humans make about
their
interpersonal conduct.
But it's like, arbitrary.
That's impossible. It's
How's impossible?
Because the word arbitrary is a value judgment. You would be using your own standard of value to judge that it's arbitrary. Nothing can be objectively arbitrary.
First of all, something could be objectively arbitrary, 100%. Something that is in reality arbitrary.
Define the word arbitrary.
Arbitrary means the fact that it did not have to be that way.
Yeah, that's not really what I think you're meaning, though. I think you're meaning as unimportant.
No, I'm meaning exactly what I mean. Arbitrary means it was at random, and it does not necessarily have to be that way. That's what I mean by arbitrary. And something could be objectively arbitrary. It means that it is an objective fact that it does not have to be that way, and it is that way either at random or, it would always revert back to randomness, but the fact that it did not have to necessarily be that way.
Well, I have to necessarily be a moral judging person because I just am. I have no choice in the matter.
Nobody's disagreeing with the fact that you are making judgments.
And obviously it's not arbitrary that I'm a moral creature because I'm making certain judgments. I have these judgments.
But it could arbitrary whether there is any morality. Let's go back to ice cream. If I make the claim, and I really, really believe that vanilla is the best flavor of ice cream, can I make an objective claim that vanilla is the best flavor of ice cream?
No.
Why not? It can't be arbitrary. It's self-defeating.
I'm really confused. You can say it's objective, but it's not an objective judgment. You're making it. You kind of miss the point when you talk about objective and subjective. It's an impetus. You're making a value judgment, which is rooted in an impetus in you.
What is value?
It's a misworded statement to say ice cream is tasty. It's just simply misworded. What you're actually saying is I find it tasty. I judge it as tasty. It's just misworded.
Okay. And when it comes to morality, what gives you the
I judge it as wrong.
It's
wrong means I judge it as wrong. Right and wrong.
Thumbs but it
up,
isn't actually wrong.
And wrong means thumbs down.
Okay, it means you in your mind think that this thing is wrong and this thing is not wrong. It's in your mind. You think that. Okay.
Right. I am in total agreement with that statement.
Correct. But it can't go any further than that.
I can go further, well, only in the sense that I have no choice but to make judgments about other people's behavior.
Okay, but again,
if Hitler tries to kill people, I have no choice but to try to stop him because.
But if you understand that it is only in your mind, that it is only a subjective opinion, then you cannot say that other people are doing something that is objectively wrong.
No, you're still confusing the issue of whether the ice cream's tasty or whether I think it's okay for other people to eat ice cream that they want. Whether I think it's okay, the judgment that I think it's terrible that people suffer is a different judgment than whether or not I think other people should kill each other. I cannot prevent myself from wanting to stop people from suffering. I have no ability to stop myself from wanting that. Now, getting to the point of...
But Hitler cannot stop himself from wanting to exterminate people.
Right. And I can't stop myself from wanting to stop Hitler.
Correct.
But
you're not able to make a claim that you are objectively more moral than he is.
Absolutely.
Okay. So anybody who's watching this that thinks that you can make an objective claim that I am more, that you watching, you are, if you think you can make an objective claim that you are more moral than Hitler, then you have to accept that God exists.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
If they believe that there are objective moral claims, then obviously that would follow, but they can't support that anyway. But
again, we're going to go back to that. You can support
back to a real central issue. Let's actually a real central issue. Can you define the word right in a way that suggests it's subjective without evoking, say, a synonym, an antonym, or just saying what sort of thing right is? I mean, define the word right for me.
Well, first of all, it's a very difficult word to define because it is it's a foundational word.
Okay. But
so
can you try? Give us some account.
Well, you can't really. Right is again, if you want to know how we come to right, is what God says is right is right, and we have our epistemological way of coming to know what is right. But right is a foundational word. You can't really describe what right is.
Well, defining right by God is just telling me who has the definition. It's not telling me what.
Correct. Again, there are words in the dictionary that you can't define further than the word itself. Okay. Those words, there are words like that.
Okay. Well, I would define. I have a pretty clear definition of right. I'd say that right is a judgment or is a term people use to indicate approval, and that wrong is a term people use to indicate disapproval. So obviously, I don't know how we're going to have a discussion, honestly, about.
I was saying right.
About a concept that you can't define.
But you can't define either. You just made up a definition that makes no sense, that you will not find.
Of course, it makes sense. Nobody
in the world up until today defined right as meaning approval. Okay,
it isn't. No, I did not say that. I did not say that. I said as a term people use to indicate their approval.
To indicate their approval?
Yes.
I don't know whether that would be right. If I approve of. If somebody asks me if they can go somewhere and I approve of it, that's right? No.
I said if you said it's right that you go there, you're indicating your approval. Right? If that word indicates your approval.
Again, it could be. I don't see it necessarily meaning that, but this is just a waste of time.
It's relevant because I have a definition of the word, and using the word objectively, you can't even define the word. So how can we talk about right and wrong when you can't even define it?
Because it's considered a foundational word, and I don't have to define it. It is a word.
Well, I don't know how the hell I can talk about a subject that we can't even define.
This is
what the hell does right mean objectively?
Benjamin, that's just a really dumb rabbit hole that I just
want to know what right means.
Okay, you don't know what right means. Right?
Yeah, I do. Right. I mean, I say it's a term people use to indicate approval. Tasty is a term we use to indicate approval. Tasty, yucky, right, wrong. These are thumbs up terms. I'm just asking to know what the hell it means objectively. I think it's silly to argue about something that you can't even tell me what it is.
A waste of time. I don't agree with your definition. I don't have to define right. It is a.
You can't define it. How can we talk about it if you can't define it?
No. Again, you could define how you know what is right.
What the hell does right mean, though? Using your view, if I took everything on a category and called these things right, and I called these things wrong, I just switched the words. How would I be doing anything that's counter to the definitions of those words if we don't even know what the hell the words mean?
Well, because then right would be meaning wrong and wrong would be meaning right.
What does right and wrong mean, though?
Oh, you're asking what does it mean when you do something
objectively? What does right mean?
Again, this is such a weird conversation.
It's a weird conversation because you've never given it any thought. I just want to know what the hell right means.
Because there are words that are self-evident what they mean.
I just want to know what it means. I just want to know what the word right means.
Well, you explain right means, and it's some ridiculous explanation.
It's not ridiculous. I'm saying it's a word human beings use to indicate.
Let me ask you a question. I'll concede it to you if you show me one other person in history that explained right that way.
Who cares what they? It's a linguistic phenomenon.
Nobody else knows what right means until 2019, 2020, Benjamin Duncan all of a sudden knows.
Sociological.
This is such a
weird
conversation
used to indicate their approval.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, but I think this has been actually illuminating and educating.
Okay.
Whether or not you might agree or not, I actually think we've gone through a lot of issues.
We've gone through a lot. I don't know what just happened.
I think actually it's been very illuminating and educating. You might not agree, but I've actually valued our talk, and I'm glad you took the time, even though you didn't feel like maybe it went anywhere that was meaningful to you. I actually felt it was.
No. I disagree with that, and okay. I did enjoy just that last part at the end. It just again, I just didn't feel like it was going anywhere, but I did enjoy this conversation. I've learned a lot, and you're obviously an intelligent and brilliant guy, so I did enjoy this conversation, and I would look forward to many more conversations.
All right, I would say the same thing about you, Moshe, and as I said, we can drag that one little argument out for quite a while, as objective morality objective.
But again, I think it boils down. I just want to tie a couple of strings together that came up throughout the debate, and so you disagree. You reject the proposition that there exists objective moral values and duties, right? Yeah. And I believe that there does exist. So we have one disagreement, which we can even explore. It could be in a whole conversation, that whether the fact that morals are objective, whether that would lead necessarily to God. So I believe that does lead necessarily to God. Obviously, you obviously you don't, because you don't.
It'd be very hard to explain.
No, 100%. But that's a whole conversation.
I agree with you that if morality was objective, I mean, I've heard secular humanists try to argue that it's subjective somehow, but they just kind of use a weird definition of moral.
Yeah, well, Sam Harris, I read his book, The Moral Landscape. He tries to argue that it's objective. I just don't think he does an adequate job.
They just play with the definition.
With the definitions, right? He turns it into tautology, and I just so again, let's leave that to the side. But because you don't accept that claim. No. And then there's a whole nother discussion of how can we know that they're objective? That's a whole nother discussion. We touched upon it. We can go into that further. I don't know if we can, not tonight, but maybe it doesn't even have to be in a live format. It could be written format. It could just be a chat. There's a number of different issues over here that we touched upon. There are things that we agree upon, things that we don't. But I think I think we got hung up a lot on terminology. I mean, we both coming from very different dictionaries, and I think that caused some of the confusion. But overall, I did enjoy. I really did, and I
enjoyed talking to you, Moshe. You're actually the first Orthodox Jew that I've had a conversation with, to my knowledge, in my life.
Well, glad to be the first, and
you're a very good representative of Orthodox Jews. Very pleasant person, and very interesting to speak to. And I'm glad you joined me today in StreamYard for the first time. And I'm going to share this around to some places. And
all right. And I look forward to more, and we can touch on other subjects as well. But I definitely enjoyed. Thank you very much for having me.
Right. Have a good day.
Have a good night.